Hello and welcome to What a Picture, a movie podcast where we discuss what makes a great film great. It's season 2, y'all.
Hooray.
Yeah, very
It's awesome.
exciting. Hannah is not here today. I'm Bryan, but we have some guests on to talk about some very strange and wonderful films. I've got Seth Vargas from the Movie Friends podcast and Ben Vargas from Cinema Shit Show. And Seth and Ben are, in fact, related, if you didn't guess by the last name. We've had you
Yeah.
on separately on the show, but not together, so this is fun.
Yeah, I apologize to anyone listening. It might be hard for you to tell the difference between the two of us because we sound identical.
Yeah, so that's why you got to check this out. We're doing video today, so this will be on YouTube. So if you're wondering who's saying what, you know who to blame for the bad takes between the two of them. Just go check it out on
hmm
YouTube and watch it there. Um, yeah, how are you guys doing today?
Um, Tired. I slept like maybe 2 hours last night,
Yeah,
so that's
Yeah.
fun.
I
I
also Seth was telling me before we hopped on that he also slept very little and I had some insomnia last night. So I think
Mhm.
between the three of us maybe we got a good night's sleep, sounds like.
Maybe.
I
Yeah.
actually feel like that's fitting because his movies feel like you're having like sleep deprived hallucinations. So this this
Yeah.
actually this actually might be fitting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You're talking,
Yeah.
of course, about the films of Andrzej Żuławski, who is our filmmaker in focus today. We're going to attempt the somewhat impossible and crazy task of covering four of his films today. Um, I had this idea because I wanted to sort of do a deeper dive into the stuff that I hadn't seen yet.
Mm.
And I watched one of them and was like, oh man, between this one and the ones that I've seen, this is like worth talking about and the similarities and different things. So thanks for joining to talk about them. Today's movies that we're talking about are The Third Part of the Night, The Devil, On the Silver Globe, and Possession. Those are in chronological order of recording, but not release for reasons that may become clear as we go through here, but sort of a crazy story as well. Wanted to open it up first, Ben and Seth. I know you're both big fans of Zulawski. Wanted to hear sort of your thoughts on what makes him special as a director.
Oh boy. I think after watching this, I realize there's a lot of directors who have to be directly influenced by this man.
hmm
Um, Lynch, I think,
Oh, certainly.
has to be a huge fan. Terry Gilliam, I think more. I think Terry Gilliam, after watching these movies, I'm like, man, like if Terry Gilliam hasn't seen these movies, it's the craziest coincidence because like I feel like he's basically like trying to like make this man's movies.
Yeah.
And also another thing that I realized after watching this is that the fact that Klaus Kinski wasn't in any of this man's movies is a real shame because they would their their styles would have worked very well together. But yeah, I mean, he has a very uh, his style is very unique. Like when you see it after watching these movies and other stuff, uh, it's very his own style. You know, it's very frenetic. It's very the camera moves constantly. He does a lot of close-ups, and he really makes the viewer feel like they're losing their mind a little bit. You know, you never feel comfortable watching these movies. And I think that's why I really connect to his work so much because I one of the things that for me, if I really love a movie, it's because it makes me feel uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Um, and that I don't have like a straight answer at the end of the movie. And so this man's work is basically as much in my wheelhouse as anybody's. So yeah, I mean, he just, you know, do they all make sense? They're all very open-ended. They're all very up to interpretation. I feel like you could have 10 people watch these movies and have 10 different opinions come out. So that's something that I really like. I like divisive work, and I feel like his stuff is definitely in that category. So what's crazy too that I didn't know is that he uses like a different cinematographer.
Yes. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
I,
because
I,
it
I
all feels the same.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's wild.
Yep. Yeah. When, not to hop in too soon, but I agree. Like when I watched Possession first and then on the Silver Globe and then The Devil, because on the Silver Globe is 88, Possession is 81, and then I guess I watched these like almost in reverse order. But when we started The Devil, I was like, oh wow, he's got the same guy doing this as must have been for the other films. And I looked it up, I was like, no, they're all different. And in my review for The Devil, I was like, the cinematographers must have not wanted to continue because it was too much of a workout or something.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Cameras moving all around. It's pretty
Hmm.
Yeah, and I
wild.
mean, if you think about it too, like with the budget restrictions that he's had and the lack of technology, they didn't have the type of cameras that they have today. I
Hmm.
mean, when you really think about what he did with some of these movies, like
Hmm.
some of the scenes, like it's really a masterclass in directing and cinematography.
Yeah.
I don't think there's many cinematographers or directors who can pull off half the stuff he does in his movies.
Hmm.
Like honestly, like especially when you take into consideration budget, the fact that his own government was basically trying to keep him from making movies. Uh, it might
Yeah.
be the most impressive run of films possibly ever, honestly, in my opinion. Like,
Hmm.
I read a lot of reviews of his movies, and like they're very divisive.
Hmm.
There's some like people that I follow that I could not believe how much they hated some of these movies. I mean, they
Huh.
hate them.
Huh.
Like one and a half, 2 stars, and like just trash the movies. And I'm like, man, I feel like we watched two different movies because
Well, do those people enjoy feeling bad? Because
It's a big
seriously,
part of it. Yeah.
if they don't,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, I think to some degree to make something great, you and to make something as unique and something that stands out so much from the rest of cinema, you're gonna make something that some people aren't gonna respond to. You got to do something like new, unique, and interesting that is going to be divisive to some regard.
yeah,
Um, on the influences side of things, I was amazed rewatching Silver Globe because I'd seen it before. There's a lot going on in that movie, so I had forgotten how much is shot first person, like basically camcorder first person footage. And so I was thinking about Nickel Boys and how lauded that was this past year for that perspective, and rightly so. But I was wondering maybe if some inspiration was drawn there as well, on
it's
sort of
possible.
how that's shot. So yeah.
I mean, I think his work kind of is in the same realm as Gilliam or Tarkovsky, where it's like you either like it or you don't. And, if you don't like the style and you don't like everything being answered for you, then you're probably not going to relate to these movies. You're probably not going to enjoy them. And I just think that's a shame because it's like, you know, I don't know. I think just like wanting to be spoon-fed answers seems kind of boring, you know? Like, can you imagine if like life just came with a manual and it's like, all right, this is what's gonna happen day one, and here you go. This is the rest of your life. Like, I feel like that wouldn't be very interesting. But like, you know, guys like him, and the other directors that I named, and Lynch, and other directors that fall into that same type of category. I feel like so many people just miss the mark,
Hmm.
and I feel like it's a disservice to the director and to the films because why should you have to have an answer? Why should you have to understand everything? Like, you don't understand everything in life, you know. You guys both have kids, I don't, but like, the
Hmm.
stuff that your kids do, I'm sure sometimes you like scratch your head and you're like, what are you thinking? You know what I mean? Like, you, but that's what makes that person unique. And, for me, like, to be able to make On the Silver Globe, which in my opinion is one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Hmm.
Like, you can't
Absolutely.
have like, if you were to follow like a formula, if that movie was to be made Hollywood style with a big budget, it would be terrible. I
Hmm.
can't imagine, like, I don't want to see that movie. And so like, I don't know. I probably sound pretentious like saying all this stuff, but it's like I feel like, when I go into a movie, whether it's a stupid, slapstick comedy or something like Possession, I try and go in with an open mind. I watch a lot of really bad movies and I enjoy a lot of them. But like if I was to go in with like an attitude of like this better be like this, I think you would miss out on a lot of great cinema. And I feel like directors like this just people don't really give it a fair chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Totally feel the same way. Um, all right, well, we've got four movies to cover, so let's jump into some of them. So I do wanna, I think we're probably gonna spend a decent amount of time on the Silver Globe. So I'll try to carve out some good time for us to chew through that one best we can. But we'll go sort of chronologically in shooting order because I think that probably makes most sense given where this stuff goes. So the first movie we're covering is the third part of the night. So um, I saw this for the first time about a month ago, and I believe it was both of your first time on this one as well, watching it. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
What were your thoughts on third part of the night?
It's Go ahead, Seth. I feel like I already talked a lot.
Yeah, it's I mean it's very well done. We talked already about the Żuławski style of shooting, which is a lot of spinning and a lot of movement.
Hmm.
And it feels like, this is his first feature. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it seems like he almost finds that style halfway through this one, where
Hmm.
when it begins, I was like, oh, okay, so he's not doing that yet in this. And then part of the way through, we start seeing it more and more. I enjoyed this one. I My answer for your first
Hmm.
question would just be, why is he so great?
Hmm.
It's because, like Lynch and Tarkovsky, he's so good at making us feel terrible, and I think that's very important. I think it's a great exercise, because the world can make us feel very terrible, real life, and films are a good place to exercise emotions, not just to experience something, but to exercise emotions and fantasy and experience things in a safe place because they're not real, but our feelings can
Hmm.
be real. So I just appreciate how horrified he makes me feel in all of his films. The third part of the night, I was uh, maybe the most confused about because I wasn't sure if this was surreal or not. The other three are just so easily grasp. It's so easy to
Yeah.
grasp, like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, I'm not in the real world, kind of. Where this one, it takes place during Nazi occupation of Poland, and so I thought maybe it was like a more straightforward movie. But again, as it
Hmm.
progresses, you're like, oh no, there's something on here, and we can see the Lynch influence. We can see where he influences Lynch in terms of like
Hmm.
doppelgangers, which is something that happens throughout his films, and like uh, people just suddenly becoming other people,
Hmm.
Hmm.
and we're not sure if we are perceiving them that way or if the characters are.
Yeah.
I was so confused towards the beginning when they talked about louse feeders, and
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh, is
what
that a
those are.
Polish thing? Is that a like meaning like is that like a phrase or is that a whatever?" And then part of the way through, I actually just paused the movie and looked it up. I was like, Polish louse feeder, and then found out that it's all real. So that was very interesting learning about that and how at the time, like academics were actually volunteering for these programs to be saved. And there was a really, really chilling line in the film where one character asks another, "Do you remember when they took the professors away?" And it was like, wow, very, very, very scary considering certain
Yes.
things that are happening now within our own country. So, so yeah, this one, I don't know if we're gonna rank these movies, but
Maybe at the end. Yeah.
yeah,
But
yeah, but this one
yep.
still really great. Um,
Feels to you like
and
he's sort of finding his style and footing a bit.
yeah, like I
Yeah.
said, it feels like part of the way through, and we
Hmm.
know how films are made. They're not often filmed in sequence, in order. But it definitely feels like part of the way through, perhaps he got some freedom
Hmm.
in experience and was like, "Oh, we can do this. Let's do this a little bit more."
Yeah.
Or perhaps it's just as the story becomes more surreal, as Michael loses more and more and gets further into, this relationship with blood-sucking parasites, um, that perhaps as his grasp on reality is being lost, uh, that's when as Ben said, frenetic style kind of comes in. But yeah, I thought this was great.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, the lice stuff freaked me out. It was very unnerving, and I did not like it.
Yeah.
I have a new thing I don't like in movies. I had a new one unlocked for this
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I didn't when they were like feeding them, I guess. There's like a
Yeah.
scene where they're like
When
showing
when
them like put it inside.
so you know what that is?
Mm.
Was
That's
that
them.
the typhus
Yeah,
that they're
that's
yeah.
they're actually anally injecting them. So we think of lice, right, as like super small, like
Hmm.
right? But the movie shows how you can actually pick one up and like put it in a little holding thing and then insert. I mean, it's a very, very fine needle, but so yeah, they're actually inserting it
Hmm.
into them.
God, it
Yeah.
was terrible.
Yeah.
Very gross. I thought the lice stuff for me, I mean, it definitely stands out. I love that you like see under the microscope and see up close, and it sort of literalizes the metaphor of the movie in some ways. So that like visual, I guess, really stuck with me. Um, the surrealism here, I think, felt to me like a more familiar surrealism that I'm used to from other directors, where, it's very Buñuel of, you've got, uh, people who may or may not be different people, and trying to sort of orient yourself, and the movie resists you finding your footing, basically. So I liked that this was in sort of that style of surrealism. Um, and I did respond to this one. I think especially because of the it is in some ways, like you were saying, Seth, a little more grounded, where you're not immediately, thrown into an entirely different world like you are in some. There's a political time and place that it's speaking to, and a situation, and they're on the streets, and the lice feeding is actually, historical, but shows a little bit of how, reality can be as strange and wild as, well, maybe not the other Zulawski films, but other non-real films, maybe.
Right, right.
So
Yeah,
do you
it's like Żuławski's version of a World War II film.
Yeah.
It's incredibly grounded, but it's done in a way where you're like, is
Hmm.
this real? Like, but of course, if you're living in Poland, you would know these things, and so these
Hmm.
things would hit you differently. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
so do you
certainly
I
true.
mean, do you feel like the lice are kind of like a metaphor for all the atrocious things that the Nazis were doing to Polish people and just in general?
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit more thematic. There's the political aspect, there's sort of the character aspect, which is mostly, again, Nazis chasing our main character down through a variety of things, and he's part of sort of the resistance. But there's like this idea of toying with or playing with others, but also feeding off of others. So with the lice and the people who are feeding the lice and sort of like manipulating them, there's like this um I guess toxic relationship between the two, almost, where
Right.
it's like one is the aggressor in some sense, the other is the aggressor in other senses, and it's all just very like tangled up and gross.
Yeah.
Um, so that adds I think a layer to the themes of the movie, which are, I think, very um, political and character driven, but also just sort of generally about humanity and how we treat each other, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I found it interesting because I looked up, he was born the year after the Nazis invaded Poland, and he's Ukrainian. So Ukraine obviously was on the part of the Soviet Union, and so I mean he had to have had parents and grandparents who were either in the war or part of the resistance. So I mean that had to have had a big impact on his life, clearly. Um, just based on the people around him, because I can't imagine that he didn't know anybody who, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
back then, like it wasn't like you had a choice. You kind of were, if you were of age, you were probably part of the resistance. So
Yeah.
um it'd be interesting to see. I don't know. I haven't heard any interviews or anything, but he had to have been influenced by all of that being, not that he was alive for it, but that,
Yeah.
uncles or cousins, or you know what I mean? Like there had to have been somebody who
Yeah.
had gone through that with him. So
Certainly.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a line when they're t talking about the breeding of the lice, um, where they say something like all things, they've lost their will for self-preservation. And I think what that kind of said to me, especially like with the ending, and then his acquaintance who's like, if I get captured, I'm just gonna tell on everybody. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to, but I just know myself that I'm not going to be able, like, I'm not strong, basically. And then, in the ending where he sees the hallway with all of the tortured people in it,
Yeah.
and you know, they're doing this to the lice to cure a disease, and it's also, which is to save lives, and they're also volunteering for this to get better rations and to prevent themselves from being rounded up and sent off to concentration camps. And so I think what I took from it, and I don't know that this is what he's exactly saying, but I think that all of us have, like, visions of grandeur of what we would do if we were put through this process, right? Because what the Nazis were doing was a process. It wasn't just like
Yep.
a massacre or like blowing people up. It was a system, a systematic system. Wow, what a great thought. It
Mm.
was like a systematic thing that they did, much like what they're doing to the lice, right? And over
Hmm.
time, it breaks down people's will. And so, as much as we would want to be heroes, I think we also have to recognize that this shouldn't be done to humans, because humans eventually, again, we love the stories of people who, you know, were able to maintain their spirit of bravery. And again, we all think that we would do that, but the fact of the matter is that um, most of us wouldn't and couldn't expect that of ourselves or others. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I took that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, why don't we get on to our next movie here, which is The Devil. Um, what did y'all think about The Devil?
Insane. Just
Yeah,
absolute insanity. I
absolutely.
mean,
Yeah,
he starts the movie at like 10,
yeah.
Oh
like
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just
Can I
like
can I just say
immediately.
one quick thing about
Yeah.
the third part of the night? Because
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
said something, and I don't want to say like, oh, Żuławski's figuring out how to make a movie. Like, this as your debut feature is incredible,
Oh
and
yeah.
I think that he definitely deserves to be in the category of filmmakers that we talk about when we talk about like hitting the ground running, like Sidney Lumet,
Mhm.
or whoever, like David Lynch. It's like, oh my God, this is your first feature. So anyway, just wanted to say that.
Yeah,
But
you're
yeah, The Devil.
comparing to his other films, not to,
y-
yeah, yeah,
Right, right,
other
right.
filmmakers. Yeah.
No, 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 no. Yeah. But yeah, The Devil is insane.
It's nuts, yeah, the sort of prison breakout aspect again, political um themes. Yeah, this one I guess took a little longer to grab me. It was until I started seeing what he was doing, I guess, structurally, that I was like, okay, I see what's going on here because you get basically my read on this, and it's not exact, but basically you've got three acts to the movie, and it's almost this cyclical structure where Jakob visits a series of different characters three different times. So the first time through, you're like, man, he's meeting all of these different people. Who are they? Are we ever going to come back to them? Like, what's going on here? And all of these family members and different groups of people. And then, like, the second time through, all of their plot lines are sort of developed a little further. And then the third time through, everything just goes to shit, basically, with every single character. So once I got like what it was going for, because the first time through the cycle, I was like, man, this is just a lot of people. Like, where is it going with all of this? But then as it started revisiting, I was like, okay, I think I get what this is doing. So took a little bit longer to grab me, but once it did, I thought it was really good.
Do you feel like this is kind of like the age-old story of like the devil on your shoulder and the angel on your shoulder with like the stranger and the nun and you know what I mean?
Yes, with the exception that I think here the devil is maybe the sixth worst person in the whole movie. So you get like this, it's so interesting because so much of the evil that this movie is presenting is external to Jakob and the devil character. And so for me, thematically, it's about like, what's the use of being moral in a world that is immoral? So,
Yeah.
why would we resist our worst urges
Hmm.
when is it even gonna matter because everything is so terrible? So yeah, that's, tough. And again, like on that depressing mark, Ben, this one is quite
Yeah.
hard to
And I think
watch.
it has possibly one of the greatest lines ever in any movie, like at the end where,
Oh my
the
gosh.
stranger and the nun show up and he's like, gives him the papers and he's like, you've acted immorally. And he goes, you wrestled with him as if he had a soul. And basically
Yeah.
he's like,
Mm,
there's no point to any of this.
right,
You
It's
all this
wild.
stuff you did was pointless
right.
because man doesn't have a soul. So it's like, I mean, if you want to talk about like, you know, his take on humanity is just very like dark. I mean, that is just it's just such an insane line. And he just like it's almost like, Judas getting paid, right? Like, was this worth it? Like, here's your gold. Like he just dumps it in his hand and then he like drops a bomb like with what he says to him and it's like, you know, uh, what is the point of this? You know what I mean? Like you you just did all these insane things for what? To what end, you know?
Yeah. I noted down another quote where Jakob is speaking with the devil character and says, "You haven't been with me recently." And the devil says, "You were getting along well by yourself." So I think that like really pushes in, the direction of the theme of this movie of like the devil being at the end, like you said, Ben, superfluous,
Yeah.
everything's already gone to shit.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't save
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah. I wouldn't. This isn't the most insane, but it's maybe the most insane in a wicked lean of the four films, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Where possession is more horrifying on the Silver Globe is very awe-inspiring, even though it's still very intense. But the devil is like it's just wickedness. It reminds me of a film that I hate, which Ben is quite disappointed in me for, which is a film called Hard to Be a God.
Mm.
I don't know if you guys have seen that, but
I've not seen
that
that one.
movie is I absolutely hate that film. But
Well, I will
uh
not be checking it out per
No,
your
you have to check
reverse.
it out. It's actually great.
I'm very much alone in not liking it. If you're a fan of like practical sets and effects, and even like a throwback to like a Tarkovsky or a Żuławski feel, they
Yeah.
accomplish it, but I still hate it.
Yeah, if you don't
But
like Tarkovsky, don't bother. But if you do, I
I
think
like Tarkovsky.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think you
mhm.
might like it. But
Okay. Good to know.
anyways,
but yeah, this movie's really terrible. Not in quality, but it's shot wonderfully, but
Hmm.
it makes you feel like you're going insane. It made me feel like I was going insane as I was
Yeah.
watching it. I watched this with my wife. Shout out to my wife.
Yeah.
She is a Żuławski fan and has bought overseas Blu-rays in order to,
Yeah,
and a region-free Blu-ray player. That's the reason we bought one, was
that's
to
pretty
watch these
neat.
movies. Yeah, but as we were watching this one, I was like, what is happening? What
Yeah.
who
It's
who are these people?
it's
And there's a lot.
interesting. I feel like you guys are right that these are like to some degrees hard movie. They're hard movies to watch. They are like feel bad movies.
Mhm.
And I have a mixed relationship with those in general, though I do really love this one. So and really all four of these I think are strong to some degree or another. Um so I'm trying to figure out why because like Von Trier or Gasper or whoever, like those
Pedro
just
Costa,
feel.
I think if
I
you
love
watch like
Pedro Costa.
yeah, I mean,
Um,
but his movies are very bleak.
Mm.
I
Bleak is
mean,
fine. I think where it goes wrong for me is antagonistic towards the audience. Like if I feel like the movie sort of hates me, then I sort of turn on it. Like why am I even watching this
yeah.
if I'm not, if the director thinks I'm, you know, I don't know. So, but this doesn't feel antagonistic, though it is like depressing, but he's trying to communicate something deeper, I think, here than just like you should feel bad. I think he's trying to communicate something particular about this is why the world is terrible. And in a way that rings true for me about why the world is actually terrible in some respects. And so I think I respond to like the truth here in some ways, and that it's not, it's trying to make me feel bad for a reason instead of just, because um, it thinks I should, you know?
See, as someone who grew up listening and loving punk music, I like it when a filmmaker is mad at me and
Yeah.
wants me to feel bad and is antagonistic. To me, there's nothing quite like someone being like, let's really mess with people. And you paid for an experience, and I'm going to give you like the opposite of what you want.
Mhm.
I appreciate that. I think the difference, and I guess I'll only speak to Von Trier, is I think that he's talented in a way, right? But
Mhm.
we're talking about Żuławski and the the style that you cannot learn or buy from an artist who just knows what they're doing. I've been showing my boys different paintings, and we landed on Hieronymus Bosch. I don't know if you guys are
Oh, no.
familiar. So you've definitely seen screenshots of his paintings before, but this dude was like early 15th century, or no, 1500s. And if you look at his paintings, it's like, was this dude on acid like back then? And like the amount of detail, but also like the skill and the craft required. Um, he's the dude who will paint like a huge scene with like hundreds of characters, and one of them is like a half bird that's like eating another person while like a lady with a very long pipe is smoking. You've definitely seen his stuff, but
Okay. Yeah.
that's what Żuławski is. And there's talent behind all of the mess. He's not just like shooting,
Right.
someone eating poop, or he's not just
Hmm.
shooting something gross to shoot something gross. There's so much talent involved, and it's like masterful filmmaking. And even with the third part of the night, which again is a great film, just the shots of the boxes on their legs and the way that the lice eating is kind of revealed slowly, and the
Hmm.
shots of them like dissecting lice and like pulling their fecal matter out in order to make this paste. It's all done so well. So even though the subject matter is very unenjoyable and horrifying, it's beautiful to look at. everything feels very intentional. And not so much in the devil. I mean, no, sorry, not so much in the third part of the night because it's smaller casts. But when we start with the devil, you're like, how did he orchestrate all of this? How did he, you know, we're breaking into a prison. The camera will pan past like 15 people like laying in a pile, like, "Wah!" And then we never see them again. And it's like the amount of work that goes into filmmaking and the time that goes into every single frame and shot. And he's just throwing stuff away with like gleeful abandon. You're like, oh my God, which I think, comes to a head in on the Silver Globe. He reduces a little bit for Possession where it's smaller groups of people again, but that's its own story. But yeah, in The Devil,
Mhm.
you're just getting so much in every frame and in every moment. Uh, I think that's the difference. I think the difference is a
It
master
does. It comes
being a
down
master.
to talent in some respects. Yeah. So I get the same thing with like filmmakers who are drawing attention to themselves in general. Like if it's Kubrick drawing attention to his own filmmaking or Fellini drawing attention to his own filmmaking, like I'm good with that because their talent level justifies that. Like they are as good filmmakers as they think they are. But when there's like a mismatch of they're not quite as good a filmmaker as they think they are, I really start to turn on the movie like, oh, you think you're more talented than you actually are, and you want my attention on you instead of like on the characters or
Are you
whatever.
talking like
So
Zack Snyder or something?
sure. Yeah, Zack Snyder is sure, fine example.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
had to.
You
So
know,
wait,
I I
I'm confused about something. So are you saying that Lars is not as talented?
no,
As
I wouldn't say
Zulawski,
so.
yeah, I would
I
say
Well,
wouldn't say
no, I
so.
don't think
Zulawski's
he's as
more.
talented, but I think that I also think Lars's films are pretty intentional. I feel like he has like a message that he's trying to convey, like through.
Yeah, some of them. I have
Yeah, no, I
more.
think yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not a hack, but he's
Mhm.
not Jalowski. And so
No, no, he's not for
he
sure.
can make you feel bad. Like
Yes. Oh,
Lars
yeah.
knows how to make you
Mhm.
feel bad.
Yes.
For me,
I'd
if I think
characterize that
about
more as
like,
just like not my thing for
sure,
those
sure.
guys. And
Y-
so it's interesting to me that Zulawski is my thing, despite
Right,
being
right,
like
right.
similar
I mean, I
in
think
this
it's I
respect.
I just think it's undeniable filmmaking. Like if you
Hmm.
have thought about the process at all, like Ben mentioned in the very beginning, when you know that film cameras are very loud and very heavy, right? At this point in history, and that film is very expensive. And then you take a scene from, Possession or The Devil, where the cameraman is literally like doing laps, just circling around characters in a very large, like echoey room, right? And people are giving great performances. It's just, and I don't think it's in any way like, hey, look what I can do. I never feel like that. It's a
Mm-mm.
style rather than, uh, hey, I'm Brian De Palma, and check this out. Check out this cool oneer, or check out this cool camera trick, which De Palma loves to put in, and God bless him. He's a
Yeah.
great filmmaker, right?
Well, he's also trying to emulate Hitchcock, who is the
Right,
master.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We got
but
to find good filmmakers to dunk on today. I think Ben's suggestion of Zack Snyder, I think everyone's going to be on board with
oh,
that. We're going to get
uh,
people yelling at
I'll
us if we
dunk on De
keep talking
Palma and
about
Hitchcock.
De
But
Palma.
but there are times when you're watching a great film where you can tell they figured out how to do something cool.
Yeah.
And it's like, here's the moment where we're doing something cool. And it is cool, right? Never
Mhm.
feels like that with Żuławski.
No.
It's
Yeah.
not like, now here's this, because the whole thing is, now
Yes.
here's this.
Well,
Yeah. Um,
also, I think the thing about when you really think about what he's doing, right, with his work, there was no social media.
mhm,
He was not making movies in the US.
mhm.
So who, who's he trying like, do you know what I'm saying? Like he's not trying to make a reel or like a TikTok video where it's like, okay, this is the cool part. Everybody's gonna watch this. I'm gonna get 3 million views on this thing.
Yeah.
He's making movies where he might not even be able to, like the movie might not even ever come out
Yeah.
because the government's trying to run him out of
Right.
town.
Right.
So like,
Wild.
this is I after watching these movies and I watched On the Silver Globe with Seth and Gene. He might be he might be in my top 10 favorite directors.
Mhm.
His work is just so like when I after watching On the Silver Globe, I felt like it like changed my life. I was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
God."
Yeah.
Like this is
Let's
literally one of the best movies I've ever seen.
let's get into that one. Yeah,
Well,
I
wait,
was
before we
just
move on, I hate to
okay.
be the before
One
we move
more.
on guy,
Yep,
but
you
I'm
got it.
I'm just so fascinated by In the Devil, all of the incest
Mm, yeah.
God, it's
and
crazy.
yeah, like I don't think that the movie is because the movie's too crazy. It's too
Mhm.
crazy to say that it's systematic, and maybe if I watched it like 4 or 5 times, I'd be able to pull out something very neat. To me, the movie is just showing every area of life,
Yeah.
like including entertainment, government, military, family, and just like the worst possible things happening almost like in all of them. But yeah, the whole storyline with his mom and then becoming a killer for people's enjoyment and entertainment, as like an extension of being a prostitute. It's really wild. And again, like I think as you're experiencing the film, there's just so much like he's throwing things away. Any one of these plot lines would have been enough to fill a 90-minute film. And he's just
Yeah.
like, hey, now we're gonna go to this house and a horse is gonna run through, and now we're gonna stuff is on fire, and here's this really insane character. And he's just gonna be around for like six
Yeah.
minutes and then we gotta move on. But
There was a couple more things in The Devil I wanted to talk about real quick.
Let's do it.
The scene, I think one of my favorite scenes, and it's such again, it's like Sis said, like these scenes are like they're so impactful, but they're also just like here and gone, and it's like it's like your head's on a swivel. But the scene where, and I thought it was a kid, but I'm guessing it's just like a little person
Mm,
who we found
yeah.
out is named Theodore later in the movie. When
yes,
he's
yes,
walking around handing the pistols out, that scene was insane.
yes, yes,
Scene was so the way it's shot, it feels like it's a little kid. So you're watching it and you're like, man, this little kid's like handing out pistols.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just I don't know. That scene to me was like
Yeah.
that was like my favorite, possibly my favorite scene in the whole movie. But then at the end where he like turns into the beast, like, I think that's just him showing that like, the duality of man, like we all have that beast inside of us that's capable of doing terrible things and for what gain or what end, like
right,
it's like I said, like, he gets his money and it's like cool, like you wrestled with him like he had a soul, like that's just so it's so
Mhm.
devastating. The ending of that movie, that line, it's like almost had the same impact that the end of Martyrs had for me. It's like,
mm,
you just watched 2 hours of just this like the worst parts of humanity, and then it's like, for what? Like, what
yeah,
was the point? And it's like, you know, if this movie doesn't give you some type of like existential dread,
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have a soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. There's definitely a sense in these movies where, like we've been saying, they're packed with ideas and themes. I think to some degree you can like get the gist of the movie first watch through and enjoy it without catching everything, particularly for Silver Globe, which we'll talk about next, which is like I've seen it twice and still feel like I'm maybe 50% of the way there and understanding, what's going on even, but it's
Um,
so
what?
enjoyable on an aesthetic level and there's so
Oh yeah.
much to engage with and you don't need to be following everything or catching everything um to enjoy or I think get what Zulowski is wanting you to get out of it.
Yeah, these movies are very rewatchable, and not because they're like necessarily enjoyable from that standpoint. Like it's pretty like depressing and hard to watch, but
A
I
lot more to
feel
get out
like
of it.
every
Yeah.
time you watch it, you're gonna like pull other like new stuff out of it because there's just so much packed into like 2 hours. One thing I did want to discuss because especially Seth brought up Lars. How do you feel that he handles women? Because like
Hmm.
he has like a strange relationship with women in all these movies.
Yeah.
Is that just me or
No.
like I don't
Possession.
know that he's misogynistic, but like
Yeah.
he's very he's just like Lars, he's very feels very comfortable getting very violent with women and putting them in positions where it's just not like good. Now, granted, in The Devil, like, she at the end, she slices him and, gets away and stuff. Like, it's not like they're like helpless victims, but I don't know. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know how to like take that aspect of his movies with
Yeah.
women because it does seem, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I actually have the most issue with that with possession. Um, for I guess some reasons we'll get into, but that is so focused on, the marriage. I think it invites that a little bit more.
Hmm.
Here, the actress who's sort of in both, really in the lead in Third Part of the Night, lead
Marta, yeah.
Marta, and then has a part to play in The Devil as well as like
Yeah.
the fiance. She, I think, is really good, and I think I do like both of those characters, and they feel like real people. I mean, like you said, they're going through a lot, but in a way that I think is descriptive and not prescriptive. It's showing what happens to women in
Mm.
situations like
Hmm.
this in a way that I think is meant to make you feel bad about it, So
Yeah.
there is, I guess, like you said, a comfort level with putting women in those
Right.
positions, but it feels like he's trying to elicit some empathy in a way that I think
Yeah, well, yeah,
is
I don't think
good.
that it's a bad thing. I actually think in a way it's a good thing because I don't think that the average, especially males, if you aren't doing those things to women, I think most people don't realize, how much bad things happen to women on a daily basis. And so I think showing that on film and like making people think about that kind of thing is a good thing overall. I just was curious if you guys had like an opinion of like
Yeah.
how he is with his, the women characters. Side note, the actress who plays Marta is possibly like one of the most attractive women I've ever seen in a movie. And I mean obviously Anna in Possession is very beautiful too. He has like an eye for that, I guess.
Yeah. Polish women.
Yeah, I guess so.
I thought there was great braid work on Marta throughout
Oh,
the film.
yeah.
fantastic. And we didn't even mention the live birth scene, but
Oh
you know,
yeah.
now we're
Mm.
now I really am the let's not move on
The
guy.
live birth scene was wild. When it was
Yeah,
happening, I
I've
wild.
seen
literally was like,
two.
was that real? Like, did that actually
Oh
happen?
yeah.
Like,
Real, I mean, real, I guess, archive footage or
okay,
something,
so it
but it
wasn't
was a
like,
real, yeah, real birth, it seemed.
I don't I
Um,
it
and then did
yeah.
you notice in third part of the night, there's definitely some, fake baby doll going on in some of the later scenes.
Sure, sure.
That is not a real baby.
well, he probably had budget restrictions too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure.
a big part of it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've
Uh,
seen two live births in real life and um nothing compares to the intensity of that moment. And
oh
so
yeah.
whenever I see anything like a live birth on film, I'm brought right back there and I'm like, no, thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to describe it, but Seth one time described to me uh
Oh yeah.
what
Oh yeah.
he said it looked like, and I I will never get that description out of my brain.
Yeah.
That was enough for me. I don't need to see it in
Everyone
real
should
life.
experience it in their lifetime. That's all I gotta
No,
say.
I'm good.
Yeah.
All right, well let's get into Silver Globe here.
Oh boy. Do you have 7 hours?
Yeah, no, this is we're going to attempt to talk about this movie. Man, the first time I watched this movie, I just like I felt like I leaned into the experience and just like I'm sort of not going to follow this. I'm just going to let it wash over me. This time because I knew we were doing it for the podcast, I did try to sort of parse out what was happening as you're going. And I think I got like 80% of the way there on the plot with some like pausing, going back a little bit, those sequences in between like really like being zoned into like this is what happens in, the in between parts.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it unlocked, another layer of the film for me. And yeah, it's absolutely an incredible, one of the craziest things that's been put on film. I mean, up there with like The Holy Mountain, Tetsuo, the Iron Man, like those types of films where it's just, nonstop, like I can't believe I'm watching this stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like for somebody who does mushrooms on a fairly regular basis, um, man, if you don't do mushrooms or any type of hallucinogenics, watching this movie will make you feel like you are on. I remember Seth watching this and he was just like, he kept being like, whoa, whoa. It's like, and I think what you said was perfect. Like, y- when I experience a movie, I go into it with the same, I try not to have expectations. If a movie gets overhyped, I will not watch it for sometimes a year or two before I will actually watch it because I'm like, I need to go into this like with a clean slate. So going into this, having no idea what it was about, I was just along for the ride. And it's like, it is such an insane experience. Like I can't imagine watching this like in a theater with like people. It had like that would absolutely be like my dream theater watch would be this movie on the big screen because it's just, as the kids say, it's a vibe. I think if you could sit there and like try and dissect it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I will watch that movie many more times before I die, but
Yeah.
it really is just a wild visual experience. It's like
Yeah.
the boat scene in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory,
Ooh. Yeah.
but just for like 2.5. You know what I
The
mean? Like
whole entire time.
it's like you're in that tunnel for over 2 hours. Like literally how it feels to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, both Possession and on the Silver Globe, the first time I watched them, I was just so like freaked out and like actually scared. But on the Silver Globe, it's not the same, as I already said, Possession is definitely more a horror film, right? On the Silver Globe is a science fiction film. And as a lover of science fiction, I think it's maybe the best science fiction film ever made. I think that if more people saw this than Star Wars, the world would be a much better place, right?
Yeah.
Nothing against Star Wars, but you know, we've spent decades talking about that film series, and very few people have seen this film, and
It
that's
hasn't gotten a
just
region 1 release. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
really
just
not available over here.
and like Ben said, to see this in the theater would be amazing, like really, really amazing. I know
Hmm.
you and Hannah recently saw 2001 on the
Hmm.
screen, which everybody talks about, how amazing that is. But this film is better than 2001. It's better than Star Wars. It's better than most movies. This movie demonstrates through science fiction a really hard truth that I've been realizing and grappling with the last maybe 4 years, which is that wisdom, experience, and knowledge cannot be passed down from person to person. And every person has to learn the truth for themselves, and then they die. And then the
Mm.
next generation has to learn it. And, being online with people who are older than me and people who are younger than me, it is astounding how the same discussions keep coming up over and over and over again. And, we just saw in this country a whole bunch of young people just vote for fascism. And to me, I'm like, wait, this is settled science. This is settled math.
Yeah, we took care of this 50 years ago.
Yeah, like what
50 more than that.
growing up
Mm.
and growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, there wasn't a person alive who would dream of sympathizing with a Nazi except for a Nazi, like a
Mhm.
neo-Nazi or just, the KKK, right? And there was very, very clear lines between that type of ideology and the general population. And then in my lifetime, I have seen a generation forget and a younger generation who never knew. And so with the the device of these people who age way, way faster. I don't know if it's ever explained the exact amount that they age quicker, but
Yeah.
in
It's pretty
in
considerable.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But in one human's lifetime, the astronaut who survives, you have them crash landing to him being like a mystic old man.
Yeah, and
And
just
their
like
understanding of
generations.
who
Yeah.
he is completely changes. And then you have the next astronaut come and they're like, oh, well, because time moves rapidly for them, things become myth much, much faster. And again, for me, like living through this last 5, 6 years and being like, oh my God, every person has to learn why misogyny is bad. Every person has to learn why racism is bad. Every person has to learn personal accountability. And if people don't teach them, they won't learn it. Oh my God. It's
Yeah.
really horrifying and really terrifying. And obviously on the Silver Globe is more talking about religion and politics and tribalism and all of those things. But that's what it kind of like made very clear for me on watching. And so it was a very mind-opening and like harrowing experience in watching this. And I feel he lays it out just like so clearly. And then obviously ending, and I won't say it because again, not a lot of people have seen it, but ending where we end in a very like iconic moment and image in
Yeah.
our culture says to us, like, okay, what do you know about the reality of life and
Mhm.
information that is passed down and all of that stuff? It's incredible. It's one of the greatest films I've ever seen. Top five greatest films I've ever seen, easily. And again, to talk about things just being thrown away, as we were watching this, I kept saying to Ben and Jean, what is his costume budget? What is his makeup budget?
Crazy. Yeah.
Like,
And it
we're
wasn't much.
seeing whole generations. Like, okay, here's 100 people all dressed this way. You'll never see them again.
Yeah.
And then we're just moving on. And it's like, it's so impressive, again, on like a technical and skill and craft level. Every costume in this is the best thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Hmm.
All the makeup, it's the best. All of the practical, all of this is practical. This is
Hmm.
before computers were doing a
Yeah.
single thing in filmmaking, and it's all perfect. Oh, it's
Hmm.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to like, people say like pound for pound, like the Wolverine is the toughest animal on the planet, pound for
Hmm.
pound. On the Silver Globe, pound for pound is, I think, the greatest movie ever made. I don't think it's not my number one movie. It's definitely in my
No,
top 25, probably maybe 50
yeah,
at the very least. But pound for pound, I would like to anybody to watch this movie and say Star Wars or Indiana Jones or
no,
any
yeah.
Marvel movie.
Oh, it's
I don't
pathetic
care.
in
He
comparison.
made this on such a shoestring budget. He had, the government like uh destroying sets and
Hmm.
costumes and film and
Hmm.
pound for pound, this movie is the most impressive thing I've ever seen because with what he had to work with, this would be, if you made this movie today, it would be a $200 million budget easily,
Hmm.
easily to make
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
movie.
And like you mentioned, there's another aspect to this film that is insane in execution, which
Hmm.
is the modern day, just random people walking down the street and like
Hmm.
escalators and stuff that they put in because of lost footage.
Yeah.
Uh, How
So let's
how
get
does
into
that
that.
work?
Yeah.
How do you put that in
And it makes
and it
sense.
works?
Yes, it
It's
You're
works.
crazy.
still like, oh my God, this is
So
still
for
amazing.
listeners who haven't seen it, this basically the production got shut down by the government. It took him, I think, another 11 years before he was basically given back the footage and allowed to complete it. But there are missing sequences that were intended to be shot or maybe were shot and destroyed. And what he does with those, I mean, first of all, what we have here being shot, it'd be a stretch to call this unfinished at all or like
Right.
lacking in
Oh,
anything.
there's
You've
enough.
got more than enough film here.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
Sure.
but then these interstitials, like you said, Seth, they're so incredible of he's inserting, it's almost like a mixed media where it feels like you're having an audiobook read to you almost,
hmm
but
hmm
Mhm.
it's and then there's footage that he's intentionally placed, almost like stock footage, but I'd imagine he just shot it around
I don't
Poland
think it's
or
stock
whatever.
footage. I think
Yeah,
they went out and filmed it.
filmed it,
hmm
and
Yeah.
it's maybe unrelated to the plot being described in some ways, but I guess spiritually it fits, and it turns
well,
it into this like tone poem sort of thing where
yeah,
you
you
get
have
the
to kind
missing
of,
pieces, but it's not just conveying information, it's poetry.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, right. You have to switch your brain, like you said, Brian, about watching it. You have to switch your brain a little bit into like the Koyaanisqatsi
Yeah,
or
that's a good comp.
Baraka like
Yeah.
vibe
Yes.
of
Yep.
like, okay, I'm seeing images. Do they connect? How do they connect? I can't tell you, but I can feel it, and I'm not going to be able to tell you by thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like, and so that he was able to recover it's just it's unreal. It's a miracle, really. Like again, not to keep picking on Star Wars, but this movie is obviously surreal and strange, but again, it's showing you a timeline of events. What's happening is what's happening, unlike in The
Yeah.
Devil or the third part of the night. What's happening is happening, right? Imagine if you're watching Star Wars and just suddenly it cuts to George Lucas, filming in a mall in San Francisco and just kind of like gives a little bit of talking over it and then cuts back to the Death Star. You'd be like, what
Mhm.
just happened? And like I can't I can't emphasize enough how much of a miracle it is that that doesn't take you away from it, or that they didn't go the route that you said, which is just leave it
Mhm.
out. We'll be
Yeah.
fine. Just leave it out. Uh, and there's still enough there. But he was like, nope, we're gonna do this. And like again, that's style that you can't buy. That's confidence that you
Mhm.
can't learn. And he's a master. It's a master.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've
It's
go ahead,
it's
Ben.
well,
Yep.
Seth was talking about how, you know, how fast they age and how, from one generation to the next we kind of forget. But, isn't that kind of the perfect example of the life that we live today? Somebody could okay, you take any celebrity, Harry Styles. Harry
Mm.
Styles could literally kill somebody and then a week later we will not even be talking about it
Mhm.
because something
Right.
else crazy will happen. We
Right.
live in this like incubator where stuff is coming at us at such a like Mach speed. Like literally stuff that was like huge on Twitter a week ago, I can't even remember.
Mhm.
Well,
Right?
I mean,
We
both of
move
you are
on to
old
the
enough.
next thing.
Yeah, both of you are
Mhm.
old enough to remember what a life-stopping event Columbine was,
Mhm.
Yes.
right? And it's on the cover of every magazine. People who aren't there are crying, and I was a kid, and I just remember it was like the world stopped, you know, where now I can't tell you the last school shooting that happened. I can't tell you the last 10 or 20.
Mhm.
We only remember specific ones. And again, in today's current political situation, a month after Trump was reelected, Gene and I sat down and tried to remember all of the things that had happened in a month. And we
Mhm.
were like, oh, that's right. Oh my God. And we were remembering all this stuff. The Department of Education was just, the debt was just transferred to the Small Business Association. That happened yesterday. So if any of you have student loans, you're now paying it to the SBA. They're dismantling it. That would be front page news, and it is, but like Ben said, for 10 minutes because there's something else coming down the line, and it's just a barrage, and you can't
Mhm.
you can't get your bearings, much like on the Silver Globe. It's
Yeah.
like moving on to the next thing, moving on to the next thing. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's why it's like, Seth was like, well, a whole generation just, decided to vote for this person. And I don't want to make this whole thing political, but it's just
Feel
like it
free.
is
It's a
relevant to the
safe
movie, I
space to
think.
make it political.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it's, relevant to the movie where it's just
Yeah.
like, you know, sure, like life today moves at such a breakneck speed. I mean, like January felt like 3 months, February felt like a week, and it's already March 22nd, and I feel like it just was March.
Yeah.
And so it's
Yep.
like, like we live in like a blender. And again, it's like, in this movie, like the next generation, it's like you're starting over again. And you're
Yes.
like, how did this happen? You know, like we should have learned something. And, I think when you think about big moments in history, I feel like now they come, they go, they get, so there's like a cycle, right? Right. The thing happens, everybody talks about it. Then the memes happen, and then the memes die. And then once the memes die, it almost dies as like a thing. Like there, it's like it doesn't exist anymore. It's
Mhm.
because between that time, there's been 10 new memes that everybody's obsessed with. And then when it dies, it dies. Like there's only like, 9/11 is still relevant. People still talk about it. There's still memes about it. There's like big moments, but like we're living in a time where there's huge moments and they're happening like every day or
Yeah.
every week. And we're like, and then it's just like, okay, what's next? Like we forgot about that. So it's like, yeah, in this movie, like I feel like it's extremely relevant to like our lives
Mhm.
today.
It's yeah, because it does have that quick pace where you're with breakneck speed going from idea to idea. But I can recall now, 10 different moments in this film that are, deeply impactful. And so the way that it's crafted allows those things to stick with you in a way
Hmm.
that I guess the information that we're presented with in the news or whatever does not stick with us or uh, like we've been saying, there's this sort of nationwide forgetfulness of the lessons learned from the past. And I think this movie is trying to impress on us do not forget and allow cycles to continue. Learn from the past, know where things came from so that you do not repeat the mistakes that have been repeated.
Yeah. Yeah. This movie has, I feel like this should be required viewing in every single film school and in
Yeah,
high school.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Without
Yeah.
question. And again, like not just because it's important and not just because it's saying incredible things spiritually and philosophically, because it looks incredible and it sounds
Yes.
incredible and it's very creative and imaginative and all of the things. This is a perfect
How on
film.
earth do you think of all of this? Yeah,
Right.
it's
Like I can't
insane.
I
Yeah.
you know, we all have perfect films. This is a perfect film. There's nothing
Hmm.
wrong with it and it's pushing so many, sometimes a perfect film is perfect because it tries to do so little. Like I
Hmm.
would consider 12 Angry Men to be a perfect film, right?
Yep.
Very few elements to that movie, but everything is done as
Hmm.
intended and done
Yeah,
quite
that's
well.
perfect. Yeah.
This movie is, they could call this 12,000 Angry Men,
I
and it
like
would
that.
be still perfect. So he's just
Yes.
upscaling without
Yeah.
losing any quality. Yeah, I
Incredible
agree with Ben. This is
achievement.
required
Yeah.
viewing. If you are interested in filmmaking, or
Or,
just watching film, like I think,
or,
and Possession,
yeah.
I think On the Silver Globe is a movie through which you watch other movies, especially science fiction. And
Yeah.
Possession is a movie that you watch other horror films through.
Yep.
I know,
Well,
a lot of people will probably disagree because this is a very divisive film, but the last film, and it's not perfect, but it's absolutely one of my favorite science fiction movies. It's
mhm.
might be in my top 10 possibly. It's if not, it's pretty close. Is The Fountain by
Oh
Aronofsky.
yeah, I love that. I love The Fountain. People
Haven't
hate
seen
it.
That
it. Yeah.
that was the last movie before On the Silver Globe where I was just like, what is going on? What am I
Mhm.
watching? This is
Hmm.
insane. And it made me feel so many things, even though I had no idea what was like I
Mhm.
did, but I
Hmm.
didn't. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it takes multiple viewings, but like there's very few films that have ever had such an impact on me immediately. Like I watched this movie and I was like, I remember thinking like at the time, I was like, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like to have that impact and a movie that like was so hard to make, like how many other movies have ever had this much difficulty being made and for
Mhm.
it to still be that great is just like mind-boggling. Like literally they hand $200 million budgets to directors today and they can't make a 10% of this movie. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, oh, no, all the trapping, you have all the tools and all the money, but again, you can't buy style. You just can't. Like someone
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
has it or they don't. Yeah, The Fountain is good, Brian. It's before Aronofsky hit his flop era.
Okay. Okay. I don't even like the early Aronofsky things. I like Black Swan all right, so maybe I'd dig it, but we'll
The
see.
Fountain, I will say, is maybe his most earnest movie, hopeful movie.
Okay.
Like the Whale, I think has a flavor of that, but executed in a way that I didn't like. Where I'm with Ben, I unabashedly love The Fountain. I think
Oh, I
it's
Okay.
so
love,
good,
yeah, I
and
love The
people
Fountain.
hate it.
Hmm.
It's not a good comparison, but I think it's kind of similar to how people feel about Lady in the Water from M. Night Shyamalan,
Sure.
where like
Yeah.
you really have to be like, I believe in love
Yeah. Yeah.
and
I
things to not
Yeah, I
to
think The
not just
Fountain is one of the most romantic movies
mm-hmm,
that's ever
Hmm.
been made. And
mm-hmm.
and honestly, I was a very big Aronofsky fan. I don't know that it feels like an Aronofsky movie.
Hmm. Okay.
No,
Do
no,
you,
no, no,
Seth?
no, 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 no.
Well,
I wouldn't say so. No, 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 no,
lest we run out of time to talk
Sure.
about Zulawski's most
no.
famous movie,
Yes.
because it's the one that has been released in the US,
Mm-hmm,
let's get into Possession here.
mm-hmm.
So, how do y'all feel about Possession? I'll turn it over to you. It's probably this is actually my least favorite of the four,
Oh,
Oh my
wow.
for
Okay.
gosh.
reasons that uh might will certainly come up, but I love
Mm-hmm.
to get y'all's overall thoughts because I think I'm a little more alone in that than um
Sure.
the common there's a lot of love for this movie, certainly.
I mean, this is in my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. Um, and there's a lot of like, I feel like Cronenberg in this movie.
Yeah.
Um, because there's like some stuff that just doesn't make sense. And like like the horror aspect of it feels like Cronenberg-ish. But I mean, just the descent into madness is so well paced.
Hmm.
And, you know, after watching this again for this podcast, I, I I had this like very direct correlation to a marriage story or marriage story, which I absolutely
Oh.
loathed. There was only one scene in that movie worth watching, and that's when she cuts his hair.
I I don't call him bomb back. I call him boo back.
I mean, you could call him Bomb back as
Yeah,
well. The movie's
Yeah, there you
yeah,
go.
Bomb. Yeah.
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 Or
You don't even
I
need to
want
go
Story.
that
my
far.
I want my time back.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. Uh,
All right.
so, anyways, Marriage Story, was like this like people loved it, and when I finally watched it, I was like, this movie is terrible. It's
Hmm.
overacted. I didn't feel anything. Like I said, the only scene I felt anything was when she cuts his hair. But anyways, this movie is by far like possibly the greatest, at least from a horror movie standpoint. Kramer versus Kramer, I think is the best uh bad marriage movie ever made.
Mm.
But um, you know, the if you haven't gone through a bad relationship or a bad marriage, this is like the pinnacle. Like,
Yeah.
Marriage Story is like the kindergarten version of this movie. And Sam Neill is incredible. And I can't pronounce her name. I'm not even gonna try. I've been
Isabella
able to.
Johnny. Yeah.
What's that? Yes.
Isabella Johnny. Yep.
Yeah. She is just this is one of the greatest horror performances of any movie ever. Uh,
Agreed.
uh
Yep.
and again, his style of filmmaking, the way he shoots things, I mean, he doesn't personally shoot it, but the way the the movies are shot makes you feel like if you're like fully immersed in this movie, to me, you feel like you are also losing your mind. Um, and I mean, the scene in the subway is just every time it gets me, and I've seen this movie many times, it gets me the exact same time like I've seen it for the first time. But yeah, I mean, it's I'm a very big horror fan. I've watched a lot of horror movies. This is up there. This is, like I said, this is in my probably in my top 10 for horror.
Hmm. All right, Seth, thoughts on Possession?
Yeah, I agree. I think that The Thing still reigns supreme for me. And
Mm.
horror is great because, within the genre, there's so many other genres. And so, when someone's like, what's your favorite horror movie? You can be like, well, what kind of horror are we talking here? Because you really can't compare Possession with, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but both of them are doing something so different but so great. And The Shining and Eraserhead, which I consider to be a horror film,
Certainly.
but Love Possession, we did an episode on it, my wife and I, for the show that we do. So in preparation for that, I watched a little documentary where uh, they interview Żuławski and the writer, and it was pretty eye-opening. The writer was very funny, and he just talked about like the writing process and some of the reasons why they did things. We've all been thinking about Lynch a lot, and one thing that keeps coming up in discussions is like his intentionality. And I think sometimes when we're trying to understand a film, and we can try to understand a film because we don't like it and we want to, or we want to speak about it intelligently, right? And all three of us here,
Hmm.
and a lot of the people that we interact with on a daily or weekly basis, we all talk about film in a very public way, right? And so you don't want to like hop on to talk about Possession and not know about like why it was filmed in like Berlin, and like you
Hmm.
try to be smart when you talk about things. You can't just be like it was cool and goopy, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes we want to ascribe feeling, or no, we want to ascribe intention to things and be like this was done because it means this. So it's pretty eye-opening to watch the writer just talk about the writing process and why certain things were done. It was pretty cool.
Hmm.
With I was talking about Lynch. With Lynch, it's like, oh, what's the meaning behind this shot? And I think we can remove, the director saying, because it's the coolest thing that you've ever seen, or because it looked cool, or because it sounded cool, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we want it to mean something where they just want to show you a cool image.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, Possession rules, Isabella Johnny rules. She's good in other films. She's great in this.
Hmm.
Uh,
Her other films that I've seen, she just does not get a whole lot to do. And
yeah,
here, Zulawski gives her so much to do, and she knocks it out of the park. It's
sh- sh-
incredible.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the most anyone has ever been given to do. She's playing dual roles here.
Yeah.
She's making uh, a very lustful, passionate relationship with a tentacle monster feel very real, like very,
Yeah.
very real. At no point am I laughing.
No.
I'm
No.
not laughing through Possession. I am
Hmm.
horrified. I am buying in, and I think it's her that's selling all of that stuff. the subway scene was already mentioned, but there, every moment of this,
Yeah.
there's nothing in it that I don't think that she's selling. Some of the Sam Neill stuff is very funny. My wife and I always get a big kick of when he's in the rocking chair and he's just rocking like
Mm-hmm.
harder and further than anyone has ever rocked in a rocking chair.
I actually noticed that more this time, and I was like,
It's
how did he
crazy.
not fall over?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I wonder if they had people down below moving it,
Maybe, yeah.
because yeah.
Wild.
Obviously this is inspired by a real life divorce, right? And so we start to get into what is the depiction of women in a divorce, women with their children. Is this just saying, oh, look at the natural evils of a woman, of a sexually liberated woman, of a woman leaving a husband? I think you can start down that road. I just don't
Yeah.
see that much. This
So
doesn't really bother me in those
no,
terms
that's
because there's a supernatural element to it, right? And
yes.
yes, she is kind of taken over. The what's the guy's name? Heinrich?
Heinrich.
Heinrich. Yeah.
Heinrich
That
and his
stuff is
mother
very
rule.
funny.
It's
Yeah.
so funny. But it doesn't take you out of it. Like it's,
No.
it's similar to in the great men who are stealing your girls in cinema. It reminds me of uh, what's his name from A Serious Man?
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the character's name, but the dude that,
Iconic character's name.
yeah,
Goodness, I'm gonna need to
I'm looking
find
it
that
up right
because
now.
his name
Hey,
is said
while you
over
guys are
and
looking
over
this
again.
up, one
Yeah.
I wanted to make one note about this movie.
Hmm.
And I'm not trying to take away from her performance even slightly, but after watching these other movies all in very quick succession, I'm not sure that there's a better director to get performances out of his actors than this man. Because when you watch the other movies, the performances that these other actors give is
Hmm.
very intense and very
Yeah.
like just how many other movies have you seen where like every actor seems to be like fully bought into what's going on?
Right.
And one of my all-time favorite actors is Klaus Kinski,
Hmm.
and in every movie there's like a Klaus Kinski who's not like
Yeah.
you'll
Right.
never see them in anything else unless you search them out. They're never
Hmm.
talked about in any other movies. Like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously she is, but like these other actors, like The Devil or, Third Part of the Night or On the Silver Globe,
Yeah.
I couldn't even name one of them. But like
Yeah.
the performances are so intense. And that to me is a credit to the director. Like, and again, I'm not taking away from her performance. I
Yeah.
think her performance is stellar, but I do feel a little less impressed with her performance after
Sure.
watching the other movies because I'm like, oh, he, this is him. Like, he gets these performances out of his main characters
Yeah.
in
Uh,
everything he does. So,
on
like,
that, on that, you've got Sam Neill in this, and then Ben will not agree with me, but you've got Sam Neill uh in The Mouth of Madness, directed
well,
by John Carpenter, which John Carpenter is a good director in his own right, but
Yep.
it ain't the same.
Yep. Yep. Different
wait, are you
performances.
saying you don't like that movie or you
I
do?
don't like In the Mouth of
It's,
Madness.
I'm
I
not a
think it's
huge fan of that
okay.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I'm
think we
not,
can all agree that In the Mouth of Madness is okay. It's not his best.
no.
Okay, so
No.
here's where I
Well, wait,
fell
wait. I'm
on.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm
you
gonna
got the
interrupt you
name?
one last
Yeah.
time. Cy Abelman
Cy
is
Abelman.
is the
Oh,
dude that his
that's
wife
great.
leaves.
Iconic. Coens are great with character names,
Yes, yes. But
always,
yeah, I need
and
a
character
Heinrich
actors. Yeah,
and Cy
Yeah.
Abelman team up movie where
that
it's
would be
just them
fantastic.
stealing people's wives, like
Yeah.
a Wedding Crashers,
Yep.
perhaps.
Okay,
Oh,
so
who's the character that you mentioned you had it on your podcast with oh God, who's the guy who got killed?
George Foreman.
No.
Oh,
Jeez. The comedian he was killed
Mitch
by his
Hedberg.
wife. Uh he was in like God, what movie was that? I can't
I
remember. You can cut all this out.
wait,
there,
no. What mo Give me a country
He
or a
was in
time
that he
period.
was in like Radio something, the TV show. Why
eh,
can't I think of his name? He's one of the funniest guys ever. He wrote Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He was one of the writers.
ooh, we can
He
look
got
that up.
killed?
Yes, his wife killed him. That's how he died.
Phil
That's
Hartman. Phil
crazy.
Phil
Hartman. Phil
Hartman.
Hartman. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Um,
Yeah, okay.
wasn't didn't you mention Phil Hartman in a movie where he's like taking all the neighbors'
Oh,
wives?
Jingle All the Way.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, you can throw Ted. Yeah.
He's got to be on that
Yeah,
list.
Ted, Heinrich, and Cy Abelman. Call it
In a
Marriage
support group. Yeah,
Crashers.
Yeah, Marriage Crashers.
It'd
I'm
be
up for
great.
it.
What?
Okay, so here's where I'm at on possession. So,
Sure.
I think there's some aspect of I think, it is like a personal experience movie. I think Zulawski is trying to critique this like masculine misogyny. It seems at the beginning of the movie. It gets to like a really obvious place for me
Hmm.
where he's having the conversation with the school teacher who's the other Johnny
Yeah.
character. And he just like outright says like, I hate all women or all women are trash or whatever. And it's like, can we get a little more nuance here, I guess? And then like um I do think overall, I mean, just all of the yelling is not really what I'm looking for in a movie in general, but I get that that's a personal preference thing. The themes though, like the misogyny and the marriage stuff, it just sort of like it seems like it sort of fizzles out to me and just like it does turn into like a very good genre movie, but I don't feel like the themes are paid off as much as I wanted them to be with the setup. If it had just been genre the entire time and hadn't like set up this thematic framework, I feel like maybe I'd respond to it more, but I just didn't feel like it sort of goes in a direction where it's like I don't really get the connection between this stuff. So
Hmm.
I'm sure y'all feel differently and maybe you can convince me, but that's where I'm at with this.
Huh.
Well, I wouldn't ever want to convince someone
Eh,
differently.
you feel free. My mind and heart is open, Seth.
Yeah.
Possession.
Well, I always say, and I'm not the only person to say it, but a 3-star horror film is a 5-star any other film.
Okay. What's a 5-star horror film though? Because I got some of those.
Well, sure, sure. I mean, obviously, I think
Yeah.
Possession and, The Shining, The Thing. But what I mean is like in this arena of horror, there's just so much garbage. And unfortunately, um, there's not as high of a standard for horror. It's not taken as seriously. It's not given as big of budgets. So you have to be really, really creative. And how are you creative in a horror film? You're creative with violence, right? So you
Yep.
could take a movie, Ben was just talking about the film Inside recently, and great movie, but how you're able to be creative in the violence and in the scares is never going to appeal to an audience in the same way that a drama or even like a comedy will. So, it's hard to sell these movies to people who don't want to feel those things. But I so for me, this is a scary movie. I was scared watching this. The first time I watched it,
Mhm.
I had the sense of I have no idea what's going on. We should mention, Ben, this was the first Żuławski film you saw, right? Because we watched it
Oh yeah.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd
And
imagine
we
it'd
had
be
heard about
most,
Possession
yeah.
for a long time and it wasn't released. And there's the Metrograph in New York, and they had a streaming service. And for a long time, that was the only place where you had to sign up for the Metrograph streaming service to watch Possession.
Yeah,
And
I signed up for a month just so we
Mhm.
could watch this movie.
And then
Wow.
like the next month, I think was like it was either Umbrella Entertainment or someone announced, like a huge Blu-ray with all this special features.
Which I
And we were
bought.
like, yeah, I was like, man, I wish we had just waited a little bit. But we watched this and I was like on the floor, not like I fell out of my seat, but I was like on the floor, like scared, like what is going to happen? Normally in a horror movie, it's pretty easy, except for jump scares, to know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of, like I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff going on with the politics of Germany at the time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's again the dual roles, the idea of him being a spy, marriage, all of these things that are kind of hinted at. And again, were you around at that time and in that place, these things would speak a lot louder to you because you wouldn't have to go back and learn it. You would be living it,
Yep.
at the time. So for me, there is a lot to the movie.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it succeeds in that way, but I also think it just succeeds and excels in its genre. So I
Hmm.
don't need to connect all the dots. A little kid runs upstairs and puts himself in the bathtub at the end, and you've got people turning
Yeah,
into other versions of them. It's all horrifying. It's
it
very,
is.
very scary. So just just focusing on those elements to me, this this is special.
Yep.
Have either of you guys seen The Brood?
Yes.
Yes. Oh
Okay,
yeah.
because if you I highly recommend listening to Felicia's episode on The Brood
Hmm.
Yeah.
because
Link in the show notes.
yeah,
Shout out
it is
Felicia.
it really is it's a really good breakdown of the movie. But these two movies should be watched as a double feature because really deal with, the same things. Like Cronenberg was going through a very terrible divorce at the time.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And, a lot of people have said, oh, well, The Brood, it's very
Yep.
misogynistic and, the woman is the bad guy. And it's like, I don't see that. you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's like when people I saw a meme the other day that said, men are going through a loneliness epidemic, and it said, I forgot to pay attention to that with all of the women killing and raping women every day. So
Mm.
it's like, like for me to see like one bad female character and say, "Oh, women are bad," like that's crazy. Like who
It is.
to take
Yeah.
that ta to have that take is like insane. Like you're not paying attention. So
Yeah.
like, but anyways, The Brood would be a very great double feature to this because thematically
Agreed.
they kind of line up in a way.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up here. I'd love to hear, since we mentioned at the top, if y'all want to try to rank these four. I don't know if you have feelings
Sure.
on
Yeah, I
that,
can do
but I
that.
I can do it. So, Silver Globe #1 for me. I think Third Part of the Night would be next for me.
Hmm.
I don't know that it's the best, but it's the most my vibe with the surrealism.
Hmm.
And then I'd go The Devil and Possession last, but not that I particularly think Possession is a bad movie. I'd more have it as, like you said, Seth, a 3-star average movie. Yep.
You want to go first, or you want me to go?
You can go first.
On the Silver Globe, #1,
Yep.
Possession #2, The Devil #3, and Third Part of the Night #4. And if Third Part of the Night is his worst movie,
You can
most
do a lot
directors would
worse.
be
Yep.
hard pressed to make a movie as good as Third
Yeah.
Part of the Night.
I
Uh,
think he has some worse ones that we didn't see from
sure,
what
sure,
it appears,
I'm
but I
sure he
have not
does.
seen them.
Right. I
Yep.
mean, just for you know, uh,
Yeah.
example. Third Part of the Night I gave 4 stars. The Devil I gave
Yeah.
4.5, and Possession and On the Silver Globe are both like 11. So like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's saying that his movie, he has a fourth ranked movie, is not a knock on him by any means.
What you
Yeah,
got, Seth?
I agree with everything that Ben just said. You know, I would also go in this release order. Um,
Hmm.
with Third Part of the Night at number 4, The Devil at number 3, Possession. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
On the Silver Globe is number 1, Possession is number 2, The Devil
got
is
it.
3, and then
Yeah,
Third Part of the Night is number
yeah.
4.
So reverse release
Um,
order. Yep, got
where
it.
I think, he's definitely getting better as
Yeah,
time goes on. But no, absolutely no shade to the Third Part of the Night. And I would also rate them exactly how Ben did: 4, 4.5, 5, and 5. I think,
yep.
yeah, pretty
Neat.
pretty incredible. Pretty
Yep.
incredible.
All right. Well, Seth and Ben, where can listeners find you if they want to hear more from you?
I prefer not to be seen.
Yeah.
No, you can listen to me talk about much more terrible films than anything that we talked about today. We predominantly do very much B. We do some. We have done some exceptional horror, but it's few and far between. So, anyways, you can find us Cinema Shit Show on all of the podcast avenues. So yeah.
Very nice. And Seth?
I host a show with my friend Michelle called Movie Friends. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Movie Friends Podcast, and you can listen to us everywhere that you listen to podcasts, and we
Yeah.
cover everything.
Everything. Yeah, highly recommend both of those shows. They're great. If you're new to this show, you can subscribe to us as well. Rate us 5 stars. Email us at podcast@whatapicturepod.com. And I am also on Blue Sky and Letterbox, so you can follow me there. I guess biggest takeaway, like people need to see On the Silver Globe. That I guess is, I think we're all in agreement of like everyone should see that movie. So that's where we'll end. And thanks for listening. Thanks for
Awesome.
coming
Thank you
on,
for having
guys.
us on.